Hi there BookTube, it's Emma from Emma's Bookish Lifestyle, and sorry, let me just angle the camera. Conan's decided he needs to be in the video. This is my little Conan. I just wanted to do a brief video, and I say brief, I'm going to try and keep it brief. I know I said that with the last one, but wasn't quite as successful as I was hoping. I just wanted to do a book review this time. So this is a book review of C.F. Iggulden's DARIEN, Empires of the Salt, which is the first book in his first fantasy series. Now, C.F. Iggulden, or Con Iggulden, as some of you may know him, is a historical fiction writer. I haven't actually had the pleasure yet of reading him as a historical fiction author. However, I am planning on doing it now. Reason being, this book. This book is phenomenal. I would highly recommend it, especially to anybody out there who is keen on the idea of fantasy, but maybe a little bit trepidatious towards it because of the sometimes extendingly descriptive scenes that you get in some of the fantasy books. I know that when I first started reading fantasy, that was one of the things that kind of daunted me a little bit, and so I fully understand that there may be people out there that want to try this genre but maybe don't want to go into like a Robin Hobb 11+ book series, which just sounds way too daunting, even if it's broken into bite-sized trilogies. This is only going to be a trilogy, and I did this as a book buddy read with Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures, and I have to say I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. It was my first book buddy read with Mel and my second book buddy read ever, and I just love them. I really do love them. So if anybody else wants to do a book buddy read and has a book that they can see on my Goodreads or that they've seen on my channel that they fancy reading along with me, then please do get in touch in the comments down below, and we'll sort it out. I'd be really happy to do that with you. What I loved about this book, and I think Mel's already sort of commented on this, was the fact that not only did it have an ample start that really drew you in and was dark and atmospheric and, you know, character and world building at the same time, it had a sort of almost like a hidden depth to it. It was almost like Con Iggulden had written out a historical story behind this before he even started. So it felt like the world was well in place, that this was a world that was degrading. This particular city of Darien was sort of one of the last large sentinels, I suppose, of a empire that no longer existed, with people and characters that were manipulating a situation, this particular city being controlled by a family of 12 individual families headed by one king. And, you know, the way that they were controlling the city and the city environment meant that certain people in that situation didn't really have a very good existence. They had a very poor existence. What I also liked about it was there was obviously a village element to it, and some of the characters came from that kind of more rural route. So you got to see also the effects of somewhere like Darien compared to a rural location in this same world. The world building was there, and it was atmospheric, and there was some scenes very early on of an illness of sorts, a plague of sorts, that didn't go into great detail, but obviously had a very big impact on this city and its surrounding villages, and unfortunately seemed to be more detrimental to the rural environment because they didn't have the financial support and systems that were in place in Darien. There are, apologies if I get it wrong, but it's about 4 or 5 main characters in here. The first one is Elias. He is a hunter in the rural village outside of Darien, and he's also a village elder of sorts, so he heads up the local council, and we first come across him as he's experiencing this plague and its effects on his family. He's very much a strong father figure and a family man. I really appreciated this as Mel did in the book, and found it extremely refreshing to have that kind of family dynamic portrayed in a book, especially in a fantasy book of this nature. It did have a feel of the historical fiction about it as well, so you could tell Con Iggulden's obviously his written integrity from his other books, but you know, he really did portray Elias very well. Now what we find out very early on is that he has something in the way of a magical ability. Now we're not fully aware of what until a little bit later on in the book, and I'm not going to give it away because it is obviously, I don't want it to be a spoiler, but he's one of a few people that come to light that have an ability to control or use magic for certain things, certain ways. Now he's not a young man, he's got 3 growing children. The children aren't young. I think his daughters, he's got a son and 2 daughters, and I think his youngest daughter sort of came across around the sort of 6-7 years of age in my mind, but it might be different to other people. And he gets introduced to a sort of a I kind of, the best way I can describe it in my head of Deeds, who is the chap that he meets up with, is a gambling, gun-toting Roman warrior. But he's not. He's a fly-by-night. He's out for his own means and his own good. He doesn't take into account anything other than his standard of living and what his expectations of life are. So they cross paths, and it leads them towards the path of Darien. Now, meanwhile, we go into Darien and we start to meet some of the characters in there. And I have to say, one of my all-time favourites out of the whole book is Tellius as well. Now, Tellius is equally a unique character in a book that you don't often experience, and again, especially not in this kind of genre. Tellius is an old warrior. He's clearly come from another country and escaped after some event into Darien. He's very, very Fagin-esque. He reminded me so much of Fagin and Oliver, and I'm in the old, sort of the old film edition of Fagin. You know, beard, wrinkly, crinkly, sort of shrunk down, and he has a pack of thieves, and they are orphaned boys, and he comes across a young guy called Arthur who is brought into his ranks, and he also appears to have an ability of sorts. He ends up being a creature called a golem, which is a man-made person, and his story arc with Tellius is quite interesting. And what I really loved about it again was Tellius had that kind of father figure element to it. He had the kind of, he cared about his thieves. You know, he wasn't a complete Fagin. He had some kind of appreciation for these children and the positions they were in. And yes, he was benefiting out of them, but also he was trying to develop them. And part of his development was to teach them a technique of martial arts in the form of dancing, which is absolutely phenomenal and very, very interesting and fascinating to read. So he and Arthur definitely captured my heart. Maybe a little bit more than Elias, if I'm really honest with you. And the next two characters are a young girl called Nancy, and no, I don't think it's based on Oliver, I promise. But Nancy has an ability whereby she can actually drain magic. So what she does is uses her unique talent to drain it from magical forms and magical items and people and absorb it into herself. And again, very, very well written. What I will say about this book is I was really, really impressed. What I was really, really impressed about is this is the first book and it's one of 3, and I'm not sure when book 2's coming out. And sometimes when you do that to yourself, you sit there and think, why did I start it? The other 2 aren't out yet. I'm going to have to wait forever. And it will hang on this massive cliffhanger that has you clawing at your scalp going, no, why? Why didn't I wait? Why didn't I leave it on my bookshelf until at least I knew book 2 was on its way? But it doesn't. What I really respect and love about this is that Con Iggulden does in fact wrap it up very succinctly. There is an end to this episode. There are interesting elements to it. There are new elements that are entwined into it late on in the conclusion of the book that will obviously be carried on in the second book. There is an implication of the history of the Empire itself, which is introduced towards the end of the book. But there isn't a gaping cliffhanger. So it is sufficiently concluded that Mel and I were both in the agreement that we could probably wait until book 2 came out. Not that it wasn't brilliant, it was brilliant, and I gave it 4 stars. But obviously, I don't usually give a book 5 stars unless it lingers with me. This has started to, so it may even change to a 5-star read for me. But all I can say is if you are looking for something that's kind of got almost like a historical fiction feel but has a fantasy base and a unique magic history and feel to it, based in a dark sort of city that's crumbling around itself and struggling in its own right to survive, then this is going to be the kind of book for you, and I'd highly recommend it. If you're new to the fantasy genre and you want something that will ease you in gently and not into a 11-book series like Robin Hobb, then again I would highly recommend it. I don't not recommend Robin Hobb. I loved her first book. I've started that series and I will be continuing to enjoy it. I did eat it up. In the end, it completely ridded me. Ridded? Bad English, Emma. Rid me of my book slump. But I highly recommend this. So if that's something that you're interested in, go check it out. If you've read it and you've got any thoughts on it, please let's have a chat in the comments down below. And if you want any more advice or want to chat to me about maybe the types of books you've read, or if you can recommend anything that's along the lines of Darien, or even if you've read Con Iggulden's historical fiction and you can highly recommend a particular one of his series to start with, then please let me know. I might start with Stormbird, which is his War of the Roses series. However, I do know he's got a series based on, I believe, on Genghis Khan and also on the Romans. So I would obviously appreciate your thoughts down below. I'll speak to you soon, book 2. Take for now. Oh, should we try that again? Because I don't edit my videos, guys. You can laugh away. Permission granted. Take care for now, BookTube. See you soon. Bye.